Yes.
Yeah, so good morning, everybody. So we go over a very precious sutra of the Buddha. And yeah, after, as you know, yesterday was the first teaching of the Buddha. And then after that, yeah, over a period of time, the Buddha taught different kind of texts. And this is one of the very precious sutras the Buddha taught also in the ancient India. So yeah, a very fortunate opportunity actually to go over this text, and a very precious text from the point of view of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. As you know, the Heart Sutra is one, and then the Vajra-cutter Sutra is also a very powerful sutra to be recited to accumulate huge amount of merits, purify negative deeds, and eliminate all obstacles. And so very essential points of our spiritual path to enlightenment. So for that purpose, also being here today, try to generate also a motivation according to the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, right? So then think that as the Buddha also moved out of compassion, so focus upon the suffering of all sentient beings beyond number, and then think they not just suffering in general, but every split second. And it depends on us to help a common group we have an uncommon common connection with. So for that purpose, it's very important for us to develop, you know, because then we can be a real benefit for a particular group of sentient beings or infinite sentient beings, so to say, who have a common connection with us, you know. So that's very essential for us to kind of responsibility to do something, you know. And there's not nothing more superior than the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, because that goes to the essence of the Buddhist teaching, right? So think that we're here together in order to progress on the spiritual path. And why? In order to eliminate the suffering of this countless amount of sentient beings who've been so kind to us, and who are undergoing suffering and just waiting for us, basically, to develop in order to help them. You know? So try to generate that kind of compassion and motivation for yourself. And then, yeah, we start traditionally with the prayers to praise Sakyamuni Buddha, of course, the author of this text, yeah, and the lineage also where it all comes from Buddha Sakyamuni until the present time. And then focusing about Sakyamuni Buddha, you can visualize in front, surrounded by the masters of India, like the 84 Mahasiddhas, the 70 Pandits of Nalanda, and all the other scholars of India and masters of Tibet as well. Yeah, you can visualize around Sakyamuni Buddha, including those holy beings like His Holiness Lama Zopa Rinpoche, one's own teachers. You know, you can visualize in the merit fields together with the representatives of the other Buddhist traditions. Visualize in front, and surrounding yourself all countless sentient beings, a human aspect, but they're undergoing individual sufferings, and focusing upon their suffering enhance the compassion we just generated, and then think we lead them in the prayers, you know, all the sentient beings, and taking that into account, we recite the prayer to Sakyamuni Buddha and the Heart Sutra and the Foundation of All Good Qualities. To the Founder, the Untranscendent Destroyer, the one gone beyond, the Full Destroyer, the complete, perfect, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sagata over the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and human beings, to you the complete and fully awakened one, the down transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subdue from the Sakya clan, and prostrate make offerings go for refuge. To the Founder, down transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the complete, perfect, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sagata over the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and human beings, to you the complete and fully awakened one, the down transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subdue from the Sakya clan, and prostrate make offerings go for refuge. To the Founder, down transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the complete, perfect, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sagata over the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and human beings, to you the complete and fully awakened one, the down transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, and the subdue from the Sakya clan, and prostrate make offerings go for refuge. When O supreme amongst humans, you were born in this earth, you played out the 7 strides, and then said, I'm supreme in this world. To you, O wise, then I prostrate. Yet pure bodies, form supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes from the three worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you prostrate. The supreme science, face like a spotless moon, God like gold to you prostrate. Thus three like you, the three worlds are not, comparable wise one, to you are prostrate. The saving having great compassion, the founding having all understanding, the field of merit, with qualities like a vast ocean, to you the one come to dustness I prostrate. The purity that frees from attachment, the virtue that frees from the lower realms, the one part sublime pure reality, the Dharma that pacifies I prostrate. Those who are liberated and show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you sublime community tending virtue I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all three ever devote homage. To all worldly of respects, bound with bodies, as many aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a elevation, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop or a dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. To this merits may all sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the full faults, and be delivered from the sour ocean, dirt by the waves, aging, sickness and death. I prostrate to the Arya triple gem. Thus I heard at one time that Bhagwan was dwelling on the Mars Virtuous mountain in Rajgir, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagwan was absorbed in the concentration of categories phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as emptiness and nature. Then, to the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra, said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara, how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activities of profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra, Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activities of profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeating, beholding those five aggregates also as in nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Form is not, empty is not other than form, and form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristics. Unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visible form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, no phenomenon. There is no element, up to and including no mind element and a mental conscious element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, and including no aging and death, no extinction, aging, and death. Similarly, there's no suffering, origination, cessation, and part. There's no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there's no attainment, bodhisattvas rely and dwell in perfection of wisdom. The mind without obscuration, without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas dwell in the three times, also manifest complete awakening, unsurprised, perfect, complete light, in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, not surprise mantra, the mantra equal to unequal, the mantra of Torah pacified all suffering should be known as truth, since it's not false. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata, Gatakata, Paragata, Parasamgata, Bodhisattva. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that one should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you indicated, and even that God speech voice. The Bhagavan having just spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara, and those surrounding there entirely, along with the words of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised by spoken by the Bhagavan. I prostrate to the gathering of the Dakinis of the three chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By the power of clairvoyance and mentioned emanations, look and petition like a mother for a child. Akasamara sasana samarayape, akasamara sasana. Agasamarasana Samaraya Tayata Gata Gata Paragata Parakama Bodhisattva. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be dispelled, may they be pacified in the Guru Soul. May all negative forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified, and may the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. And may we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to the Dharma, and may all enjoyments be accordance with the Dharma, and may it be auspicious and perfect happiness here, right now. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect pure Guru. Correctly devoting to him is the root of the path. By clean seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. Understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once is greatly meaningful and difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly day and night takes its essence. This life is impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just the shadow follows the body. The reason black and white cannot follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be careful, to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. Seeking samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering. They are uncertain, cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping the Pratyamaksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have other migratory beings. Please bless me to see this and train a supreme bodhicitta, and bear responsibility of freeing migratory beings. Even if I develop only bodhicitta, but do not practice the three types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the bodhisattva vows with great energy. Once I pacify distraction to wrong objects and correctly analyze the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified part of calm abiding and special insight. Having become a pure vessel by training in the general paths, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping pure vows and samayana. As I become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledge to light my life. Then, having realized the importance of the two stages, the essence of the Vajrayana, by practicing with great energy, never giving up the 4 sessions, please bless me to realize the teachings of the Holy Guru. Like that, may the Gurus will show the noble paths, and the spiritual friends who practice this have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely all outing in the hindrances. In all my lives, never be separated from perfect Gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. By completing the qualities of stages and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajrayana. Sajibege Jojimedo Dravirale Nejenge Padi Sangye Jengdu Medevarni Jogena Dajeng Jebar Jogidam Gurana Akamniyatayami Sangye Jedan Suni Tsunam Janjo Pada Dani Gyasoji Dagi Chichi Gebe Sonagi Yola Penche Sangye Doba Sho Sangye Jedan Suni Tsunam Janjo Pada Dani Gyasoji Dagi Chichi Gebe Sonagi Penche Sangye Doba Sho Sangye Jedan Suni Tsunam Janjo Pada Dani Gyasoji Dagi Chichi Gebe Sonagi Dola Penche Sangye Doba Sho. Yeah, so the Buddha was, before teaching, there's this quotation of Arya Nagarjuna in praise to the Buddha, where it says, moved out of compassion, you eliminate wrong views. You teacher of the sublime Dharma, to Gautam Buddha, I pay homage. So, yeah, that summarizes a little bit of the Buddha's first teaching, right? As yesterday, that's the Buddha, after achieving enlightenment, he was doubting if he should teach or not. Because the teachings, to eliminate suffering from the root, you have to depend on emptiness, right? And in order to understand emptiness well, then it's not that easy. So the Buddha was a bit kind of doubtful if what he saw, after having seen ultimate reality, would that be of benefit, or will beings just become confused, right? So, but then based on his incredible compassion, and then being requested by the different gods to teach, then luckily he taught the Dharma out of compassion, right? So thanks to that, we have these incredible teachings available, you know. So it's very rare to be born at a time that these teachings are available, you know. So by an authentic teacher who taught out of complete compassion for all sentient beings, only for the purpose to eliminate suffering, you know, that was his only purpose to teach, you know. So and then not only out of his compassion, but also understanding what is suffering all about and how to eliminate suffering, right? So that's why the Buddha taught. And that's why it says, moved out of compassion, you will eliminate wrong views, meaning Nagarjuna's praise to the Buddha in his Fundamental Wisdom, chapter 27, if I'm right, that Nagarjuna explains, you know, praising the Buddha for his incredible teachings of the Vajra-paramita, you know. So that's why the Vajra-cutter Sutra also belongs to that category of the Vajra-paramita, right? So we have different elaborate Vajra-paramita, like the 100,000 verses, and we have 20,000 verses, 8,000 verses, and then we have Heart Sutra and more smaller ones. So the Vajra-cutter Sutra is kind of 300 verses of the teachings on the Vajra-paramita. Yeah, so the Buddha taught this. Why? In order to eliminate wrong views. That's what Nagarjuna says. So what kind of wrong views? Mainly not the wrong views of the ideas people have, you know, not like that, but the wrong views of the afflictions, because all our destructive emotions, you know, anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, anxiety, fear, they're all based on incorrect understandings of reality. They're not in accordance with reality, right? So that's what Nagarjuna said. You moved out of compassion, having seen suffering yourself, and then having seen that all sentient beings without exception are in this suffering state, and are not just the suffering state of the suffering of suffering or the suffering of change. No, the suffering state of the all-pervasive compounding form of suffering. And then moved out of compassion, there's different levels of compassion, right? There's compassion without having realized impermanence or without having realized emptiness. So that's focusing upon the suffering of sentient beings in general. But then also there's the compassion of having realized, after having realized impermanence. So if you have that kind of compassion, it's much more powerful, right? Because then you can see that every split second, you know, every part of a second or part of a second or hundreds or thousands of a second, these sentient beings are basically overpowered or controlled by karma and afflictions. So every split second, there's a possibility for them to suffer. They have this all-pervasive compounding form of suffering, right? So after having realized impermanence, then the compassion becomes even stronger, right? Than just not having seen that aspect. But then the Buddha was a bit further than that, because he realized selflessness. He realized emptiness. So if you understand emptiness and then you generate compassion, it becomes even much stronger. Not only you see the suffering of sentient beings and the all-pervasive aspect of suffering, but also you see that they change, that they suffer every split second, and you see there's a possibility for them to get out of it, right? So understanding emptiness is very essential in enhancing compassion. So that's what it says in this verse. You know, you moved out of compassion, you eliminate wrong views, meaning the wrong views of the afflictions, because all the afflictions are not in accordance with reality. All these destructive emotions are not in accordance with reality. They work with all kinds of mental images, with our fabricated aspects of reality, and we believe that's reality. That's why what the Buddha said, or what Nagarjuna said, you eliminate wrong views. And this moved out of compassion, those 3 levels of compassion we just talked about, is very clearly explained by Chandakirti in his supplement to the Middle Way, Madhyamika Avatara. You know, that in that text, though it mainly deals with emptiness, his praise in the beginning of the text is praising compassion, right? And then Chandakirti goes into these 3 levels of compassion. You know, the compassion merely focuses upon the suffering of sentient beings, and a wish for them to be free of that. And then by understanding subtle impermanence, then focusing upon the suffering sentient beings, and then have a wish to be free, to free sentient beings, right? And not only that, but then having then realized emptiness and then focus on the suffering sentient beings is even more powerful. Because if you have seen emptiness, you see that, you know, that's what it says in the text, that all beings, basically, there's nothing to rely upon, like something to fall back upon as self or a creator or some person in control as such. Right? That self it doesn't exist in that way. Right? So you see that all sentient beings are just going back and forth merely by the power of karma and afflictions. You know? So and then karma and afflictions are rooted in ignorance. And then having seen emptiness, you also see that ignorance is not in accordance with reality, right? So that means that you moved out of compassion means this incredible strong compassion, and you eliminate wrong views is especially referring to this wrong view of ignorance. Of course, all afflictions are not in accordance with reality, wrong views, but the view of ignorance is the root cause, right? As we're going to talk about. Yeah. So, yeah. So that's moved out of compassion, you eliminate wrong views. You teacher of the sublime Dharma, as Nagarjuna says, to Gautam Buddha I pay homage, you see? So Nagarjuna doesn't praise the Buddha because he looks so amazing, or his qualifications of his speech, you know? But or the qualification of his all-knowing mind. But he praises these teachings on dependent origination and emptiness, yeah, the Prajaparamita teachings. So without compassion, you will not achieve enlightenment, right? And without depending on the Prajaparamita, you also, although you have compassion and bodhicitta, without these teachings on the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, you will not be able to achieve enlightenment. And as we just read, you know, in the Heart Sutra it says, right, all the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times. So it means all the Buddhas of the past, present, and future also manifest complete awakened, unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. We just read that. So all the Buddhas of the past, all the Buddhas of the future, and all the Buddhas of the present, they depend upon these Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. Yeah? Without that, enlightenment is not possible to be achieved. So that's the text. The Vajra-cutter Sutra is the same text it's like 300 verses on the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, right? So that text is very precious, you know. So because last year we asked people what they like to do. Sometimes we ask people what they like to do, you know. So then they said, we would like to have a sutra explained, you know. So then the idea came to do the Vajra-cutter Sutra, yeah, because we always study the commentary of the commentary of the commentary of the commentary, you know. So we always don't really go back to the origin. And last Sakadawa, when here in Jamyang, we did kind of 1 month, the whole month of Sakadawa every day, because we were all in lockdown. So, you know, might as well do something. No real events as such. So then we decided to do sutra reading. And then I decided we have the Kangyur and Tengyur. They just always piled up as an object of offering. But then the idea came to read every day a little bit, you know, out each volume. So it's very inspiring, you know. To read the sutras is very inspiring. And sutras, not only you have to rely upon those in order to achieve enlightenment, right? But also accumulation of merit, purification of negative deeds, right? Is very essential and important. If we train in the Lam Rim, or the stages of the path to enlightenment, from reliance on the teacher all the way up, to bodhicitta and emptiness, you have to contemplate and analyze the teachings of the Lam Rim, and then on top of that, you have to accumulate merit and purify negative deeds, because without those practices, it's very difficult, nearly impossible, basically impossible to realize emptiness. Just mere having the knowledge, right? You get the intellectual understanding, but to realize is the next step, right? So we have to accumulate merit, purify negative deeds, and that we can find back in many examples of if you read autobiographies or biographies of the masters of the past, right? So if you read Lama Tsongkhapa's biography, now a beautiful book being published by Tutin Chimba, but all the other biographies you read is very inspiring to see that when he was an incredible scholar with thousands of students, if you read one of his books, which he composed when he was in his 20s, it's a masterpiece. It's kind of incredible summary of all like 20-something commentaries on the Abhishekalankara. Just if you read that book, it's like he must have memorized all those 20 commentaries. It's very impressive. So the scholarship of Lama Tsongkhapa is equal to the scholars of Nalanda. His Holiness Dalai Lama once asked for some Sanskrit scholars from Varanasi, who also studying Tibetan, to read Lama Tsongkhapa's works and see what level he would fit in regards or with regard to the scholars of Nalanda. And then they say he would be one of the top ones. So it's very impressive, the scholarship. But then when he was in his early 30s, then he engages in more contemplation and meditation, and he could sit still for hours in the puja, when everybody left, he didn't notice everybody left, and he was still sitting, So he had this incredible concentration, So then he had these visions of Manjushri. Can you imagine? Like you on the other side of Zoom, and me sitting here, we see each other through a screen, right? With our eye consciousness. So in a similar way, not over Zoom even, but in actual reality, Lama Tsongkhapa saw Manjushri. So that's quite an achievement, But then, then he asked Manjushri, do I have the view of Prasangika or Svatandika? Then Manjushri said, neither. So that was a bit kind of a shock to the system, So then Lama Tsongkhapa asked, so what do I do? I've studied all the text, So then Manjushri said, you go in retreat and you accumulate merit, purify negative deeds, and then you study the great texts of the great masters of India, as well as made supplications to the teacher, countless requests by seeing the teacher as non-dual with the Buddha, and make countless requests and accumulate merit, purify negative deeds, and then eventually it's possible, right? So that's what he did, and then he realized emptiness. And then after having realized emptiness, the first text he composed in praise of dependent origination is the same thing as we just started with, this quote of Nagarjuna praising the Buddha. But then, about 40 or 50 verses, kind of, more elaborate way of praising the Buddha for these teachings of emptiness and dependent origination and Paccapparamita. So then we see that only Lamrim or studying philosophy or psychology, in Buddhist aspects of mind science is not enough. So that's why all kind of other practices are needed. And sometimes these kind of sutras are being advised to read to accumulate merit, purify negative deeds. And those who are familiar with this sutra, they also know that in the time of the last 500, it says, in the text. So the time of the last 500, according to Kamada Shila's commentary, that means 5 times 500 means 2,500. So that's exactly the time we are living now. So it's very incredible if you read the benefits that comes from reciting just one verse of this sutra in these degenerated times. It's mind-boggling. So there's one verse we also just recited with the 9 examples, in the end of the praise to Sakyamuni Buddha, and that is also the last verse of the Vajra-cutter Sutra. 9 examples of the dream and dewdrops, etc., in relation with emptiness and impermanence. Yeah? So that also we will try to explain. Yeah, so that's a little bit of the history of the Prajnaparamita and these kind of teachings, and why it's needed to depend upon these kind of sutras. And as one of the Dalai Lama says very often, it's very important to go back to the Gyashung, you know, the text of old India, because that's the origin of our teachings. You know? So, yeah, so very fortunate to go over this text today. I received the transmission for Lama Zopa Rinpoche in Dharamshala 2006 or something, in Tushita, in the old Gompa still. Only a few of us were present, a few Geshes from Kopan. And luckily Rinpoche finished the transmission, because most of the time I received many parts of text from Rinpoche, but never finished. So yeah, it's very fortunate that Rinpoche finished the time. So it's because when Rinpoche was almost towards the end, he said, "Oh, I was thinking about stopping." So we all were making prayers, you know, please stop. And then Rinpoche, "Oh yeah, I might continue," and then he finished. So we're very lucky. Yeah, because this transmission comes all the way from the time of the Buddha, right, to the present, all the way up to Rinpoche received. And yeah, so that carries the blessing of the Buddha as well as the lineage masters of the past. It's very precious. So yeah, then to attend the transmission, there's different ways, you know. If you have the person who gives the transmission that's your teacher, then you receive the complete transmission in your continuum with all the benefits, right? And if you not have a connection with that particular teacher, but you just attend the transmission, then of course you receive the benefits of hearing the words of the text, right? So there's two ways of attending a transmission. So yeah, that's important to know, because reliance on a teacher is very important. Yeah? So that's to think about. You know? So you can still attend and then receive the imprints of the words. You know? So if you have a connection with the teacher and you receive the transmission in that regard, and the teacher is your teacher, then there's even more benefits, because then you uphold this lineage, so to say, of the oral transmission. Yeah? Samdong Rinpoche, he used to explain that we have the Buddhist doctrine divided into two, you know, the scriptural teachings and the teachings of the realizations, right? So the teaching of the realizations, meaning you have to have the realizations of the three higher trainings. Or, for example, if you have the Pratimoksha vow in your continuum, that's also a realization of the teachings, right? Belongs to the realization of the teaching, because living in the vows is being considered as very important. Then from the point of view of the teachings with regard to scripture, then Samdong Rinpoche says that if you have received the oral transmission of a particular text, and then the text is in your continuum, so to say, and then you uphold that aspect of the scriptures of the teaching of the Buddha. So and there's great benefits in receiving transmissions, because Kidesensab Rinpoche, actually in relation with this text, I don't know, maybe Rinpoche received it from Kidesensab Rinpoche, I'm not sure. But Kidesensab Rinpoche said that if you have received the transmission of the Vajra-cutter Sutra, and then you recite it once, it's equal than if you haven't received the transmission and recite it 100 times. You know? So if you recite a text like this and you have received a transmission, then you recite, and also non-human beings you can invite and come to listen. It's great benefit. You know? That's why in the monastic institutions, when we recite a lot, we memorize a lot. For me, always, I was the worst person on this planet to memorize text, because my mind is like a sieve, you see. So for me, always be very difficult, but I try it sometimes. So then you recite a text, or you memorize in the morning and you recite. So you verbalize, right? So then our teachers always, especially Kuchichöda Rinpoche, give incredible advice. That's the giving of the Dharma, you know. When you recite the text, you give the Dharma to those you can maybe not see, but they receive the imprints. So if you recite Sutra, then if you verbalize, that's what we did also here, during the Sakadawa event, we verbalize the words. So those who read in English, they verbalize in English. Those in other languages, then it's more beneficial for non-human beings, because there's many non-human beings around us we don't really see, you know, and we sometimes occupy that place. And so yeah, it's sometimes good to do something in return, you know. So then that's why we have kind of sutra offering, or sang offering, of incense offerings, or sur, or these kind of recitations, right? They benefit. So that's yeah. So yeah, so there's two ways to listen, and there's many stories. Kid Sensei Rinpoche says, and Kuchje Rinpoche also said, in order to get the real realizations, it's very important to receive transmissions. So that's why we're very lucky to be, I was part of a committee to organize yearly events with thousands of monks attending over the years of all kinds of transmissions, you know. So it's very precious, because if you have received, then the understanding of the words and the realizations of the meaning becomes easier, you know. So that's why even you see it, even His Holiness Dalai Lama, being a fully enlightened Buddha, but still shows the aspect of receiving transmissions, you know, and teachings again and again. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, same thing. Yeah, so the great masters of the past, they spend a lot of time. Luckily, also when I go back to the monastery every winter, also mostly of the time I'm lucky to attend various teaching events. Sometimes more busy, one more busy than the other, because then one teacher is giving a major cycle of teachings, and then there's some time, and then other ones request from another teacher some teaching, so that's just scheduled in between. So some days are quite busy, but very precious. So that's our teacher in Gyume, again, Tutala, is kind of the warrior bodhisattva, you know, mind-boggling to get all these transmissions together. We're almost lost, you know, and then giving, you know, so that preserves these kind of incredible teachings of the Buddha. It's very inspiring. Yeah, because if the transmissions are gone, then to get the realizations will be more difficult. Yeah, so that's a little bit of the history and how to listen. And you know the story of Vasubandhu, right? And the birth outside of, you know, little pigeon outside in the tree, hearing every day, you know, Vasubandhu reciting this text. And that's an animal without motivation as we just try to generate motivation of compassion. But when this bird was reborn, he became a young boy, and later on an incredible scholar in the Abhidharma literature. The text Vasubandhu was reciting all the time. But when it came to Madhyamika philosophy or emptiness, then it was more difficult. You see? So having received just merely the words, you know, then it's great benefits. So many teachers, they spend a lot of time in trying to put imprints in the minds of beings. You know, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, same thing. He rescues, saves animals from the slaughterhouse, and then put them in a big kind of field, and then recite Prajnaparamita Sutras in front of them. You know, so it's so kind, because to get out of an existence, as if you are born in a spirit or an animal, to get out of this state is nearly impossible, right? If you study the Lamrim, it's only possible by the power of a powerful object or connection with a highly realized being, or a connection with the Dharma in this regard, you know. So it is very precious. So then you see the benefits of just merely hearing the words of the transmission as well. So yeah, people can decide themselves how to attend, right? So I was thinking to explain the text according to a particular outline I made, because I never really studied this text in depth. But then over the last few weeks, I was very inspired. So thanks to you, you know, otherwise I just spend my whole day sleeping and, you know, try to enjoy my life, go for walks and eat. So I'm kind of a person who does that all the time. But thanks for this kind of today. I read the commentary. There's one commentary by in Tibetan. There's two actually by Kamala Shila, which is in the Tengyur, you know. And there's one by a more modern scholar, Chöni Lama Dragpa Shedup. That's one master of Serame, and his kind of commentary is also based on Kamala Shila's commentary. So this is just for your information. Though there's not really a particular outline as such in those two texts. Yeah, so I just per section, because to have a little bit of outline, it gives a bit of a structure. So I just made some notes going to the commentary. So the Tibetan commentary by Dragpa Shedupla it was after Lama Tsongkhapa's time in the 1700s. He wrote a lot of very interesting commentaries. He was an incredible scholar and practitioner, on many prayers, you know, like I think the King of Prayers and many other prayers we do all the time. So he composed incredible amount of commentaries with references to the masters of India. You know, like in this case, the commentary of the Vajra-cutter Sutra is based on Kamalashila's commentary. Right? So he quotes from Kamalashila. Yeah, as His Holiness says, you know, Kamalashila was incredibly important in Tibet as well, because there were a lot of misunderstandings regarding meditation, and Kamalashila came to Tibet to eliminate all those wrong views. So he was very kind to our present lineage as well. Yeah. Yeah, so that's yeah, a little bit the commentary I depend upon. So I was thinking before lunch, we have 2 sessions, and then I go mainly through the text over this, from the point of view of these outlines, right? So you get a little bit idea of the structure of the text. Then in the afternoon, when we meet again, then, well, reading to the transmission of it, then I won't read very quickly, so then people can read themselves at the same time. But don't verbalize it at this time. Normally you can verbalize, but if you want to receive transmission, Kushtjöder used to say when we had these incredible events in Sarah, people can study, right? So that means you can read, as long as you make sure your mind is not too much absorbed in what you are reading or contemplating practices. Kushtjöder said, if you have some form of concentration, then don't meditate, because if you get concentration, then sense perception stops, right? You have to listen, yeah, for a transmission. And also you don't talk during a transmission. So everybody is, in here it's quite okay, I think, people are all, yeah, sitting separately. But if you have an hall with, you know, 2,000 monks, then there's a possibility of people talking, right? Yeah, so then Kushtjöder Rinpoche said, don't talk. Because as soon as you talk, you don't hear properly. Right, so then you miss the transmission. Yeah, so that's what Kushtjöder used to say. But you can read and study. So when we had this oral transmission of Lama Tsongkhapa's collected works, and so yeah, then many monks, they said, oh, so beneficial, because I studied for hours and hours at a time. Because we had morning sessions, afternoon sessions, not like we have. What we do is this holiday kind of structure. When Kushtjöder gave transmissions in Sarah, sometimes we start at 7:30 until 9. Until 8:30, yeah, 8:30, 8:45, and then we had debate, and then we had lunch, and then after lunch, half an hour break, and then the transmission started again until 4, and then we had dinner, and then we had debate at 6 in the evening, and then, you know, the next day same. So you can see what we do today is pretty kind of low key, you know, but yeah. So that's what I was thinking. I do it in the afternoon, so you can read, because then what I was planning to do in the morning, I explain the main points of the text. In the afternoon, you read, and I won't go too quick in Tibetan, so that takes about 45 minutes to over it. And so if you read in English, we checked here last time, and it can be done in 45 minutes. Yeah, if you don't read too slow and don't have to rush too much. And then also there's the benefit of reading the sutra, you see. So then you have 2 benefits. So reading the sutra as well as listening to the transmission. And if you like to receive, you can receive. As His Holiness also used over Zoom and explained why it's possible over Zoom, because the Buddha also at the time, from the point of view of Vinaya, it's possible to let another person get ordained by the power of sending a messenger when there's a problem in an area, when it's very difficult to travel sometimes. Yeah? Then, especially for nuns was like that when it's too dangerous to travel, then a fully ordained monk was sent to her, and then in that way she could establish the vows. Yeah, so based on that point, His Holiness says, also over Zoom, or you know, you can have transmissions, receive transmissions. Yeah. So then recordings, also some lamas do that, but maybe I was thinking in the afternoon we don't record, just only in the morning, because yeah, just for my personal thing. It's a personal thing, transmission, so maybe no need to record in the afternoon. Yeah, those who like to take, they can take, but other than that, it's maybe no need. Yeah, so that's the structure of the day. Is that okay? Yeah, yeah. So then the text. Vajra-cutter Doje Chopa, it says in Tibetan. Doje means Vajra, Chopa is to cut, you know, or sometimes to eliminate. Yonsu Chopa. Nyumon Yonsu Choba means complete elimination of afflictions. Right? So Vajra, Dorje, yeah, that's explanation from the Sutra vehicle point of view, explanation from the Vajrayana point of view, right? So this is a Sutra teaching, so we keep to the Sutra explanation, and then Vajra, or some people translate it as diamond, yeah, it's kind of indestructible aspect, you know, an indestructible aspect of like a diamond, right? So if you know a little bit about stone, and the hardest stone like granite, you know, it's one of the hardest material, that can only be cut with a saw, when a saw has kind of little chips of diamonds inside, you know? So that means that the diamond is so strong to cut, you know, granite. You know, granite is one of the hardest stones you can imagine. When you try to drill, you try to drill a hole in granite, it's very difficult unless you have this kind of bit with you know, this kind of diamond on it. You know? So that means that diamond can cut the hardest material, right? So in a similar way, the Vajra-cutter Sutra deals with emptiness, right? So that means emptiness will cut all wrong views. That's why Nagarjuna said, you moved out of compassion, you eliminate wrong views, right? So meaning that with the view of emptiness, you can cut all wrong conceptions, all afflictions together with the seeds. That's one aspect. Another aspect is that, you know, it's irreversible in the sense that emptiness wins the game, or wisdom realizes emptiness wins the game. There's nothing that can disprove the ultimate nature of reality. You see that? We can disprove afflictions because afflictions are not in accordance with reality. We can see that, we can analyze that. But there's nothing that can disprove emptiness, because this ultimate nature of reality, there's nothing more superior than that. And we cannot eliminate that view and see that as incorrect, because there's no means or methods to prove something more than ultimate nature of reality. Yeah, so there's two aspects there. It can cut incorrect views, and it is so stable, you know, as what it says, indestructible Vajra, that nothing can destroy the view of emptiness. Right? So that means there's many points to that, because those who study a bit more, they know to purify and eliminate negative karma. Then with purification of the four opponent powers, you can eliminate the potential for the reason to come about, but not the seeds, right? Study a bit more. But direct perception of emptiness can eliminate those seeds, right? So there's nothing that can destroy the view of emptiness. Yeah, there's another text by Panchen Lama, one of the Panchen Lamas, right? So this text by the Panchen Lama talks about the debates between ignorance and wisdom. It's a very interesting text. Panchen Lama looks. So this text, also Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I received transmission before from His Holiness. It was Lama Zopa Rinpoche gave transmission in Nalanda one day. So luckily we were at Rinpoche, so some people went already in the morning to Nalanda, because Rinpoche was planning to go and give this transmission and teaching. So some people already went in the morning, all the way to Nalanda from Bodh. And luckily I was en route, and I was just checking when Rinpoche was leaving, because, you know, sometimes Rinpoche leaves a bit later. And yes, Rinpoche left about 1 o'clock or something. So we reached Nalanda at 4, and then, halfway, not even halfway, after a few verses, then they started blowing the whistles. That means you have to leave. So Rinpoche only did about 19 verses of 200-300. Yeah. But anyway, this text is very precious. His Holiness gave once in Gume monastery many years ago. So that's a text debating ignorance. Yeah. So then that emptiness, the realization of emptiness, actually wins the game. And then ignorance says, yeah, what you know, I'm here since the beginning of this lifetime. You just knew, you know, go away. But then emptiness, yeah, but that's true. But you don't even exist. So, you know, you have to move because I'm coming instead, you see? So that means that although we have grasped to ignorance and ignorant existence since beginner's lifetime, it's still possible to eliminate it, right? With this Vajra of that cuts ignorance, right? That's what it says. Yeah. So there's two aspects. It eliminates afflictions and kasa, and yeah, nothing can destroy this ultimate nature of reality, right? You see that? Yeah. So that's the explanation of the title, so to say. Yeah. And then it's among the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. It's the 300 verses. Sutras, the amount of verses. The Tibetan translators sometimes they calculate the amount of verses and then classify them. So, yeah, that's one aspect of the sutra. And it says perfection of wisdom, Shara Parote Jimba. Yeah, means as we know, we have the different perfections. We have the 6 perfections, right? So all those 6 perfections are being dealt with more or less in the sutra. We talk about perfection of giving, perfection of morality, and perfection of practicing patience, effort, concentration, and wisdom. Yeah. Then the sutra, when was the sutra taught? At the second turning of the wheel, which was celebrated yesterday. So yesterday was quite a busy day. We had a few kind of things to do. And then, yeah, the sutra came because the weekend is more easy. People to attend, so that's why we do today. But, yeah, the Buddha, on the wheel turning day, what we celebrated yesterday, taught for the first time the Buddhist doctrine in Deer Park, right, in Sarnath. So if you've been in Sarnath, there's a big stupa, it's a little bit down, there's a few smaller kind of ruins. So that's actually, down there is actually the real place, some scholars say, where the Buddha taught for the first time to the first 5 disciples, right? So at that time, the Buddha taught the 4 Noble Truths. At the first turning of the wheel, the Buddha taught the 4 Noble Truths directly, and the subtle view of emptiness was hidden, as we say, right? It was hidden. So then, in order to teach that to those who are more capable of understanding, then the Buddha taught the second turning of the wheel in Rajgir, right? So those who know Rajgir, it's very a moving place, that the Buddha there, I think the 3rd Dalai Lama, or the 6th, I'm not sure, the 3rd or the 6th Dalai Lama, when he came on pilgrimage to India, I think 6th, he came and he couldn't go up Rajgir, up the mountain, because he saw the whole mountain made out of scriptures of the Prajnaparamita, you see? So we ordinary beings, we just see stones. I mean, that's what I normally see when I go to those pilgrimage pages. Right? So that means our ordinary appearance is not always reality. Yeah? So that's Vajra speak. So the Buddha taught Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, including this particular text, right? Comes from that cycle, though the place where this text was being taught, is the place where the Buddha, but in general, the Prajnaparamita Sutras were being taught in Rajgir. Yeah? So this particular text is being taught in Sravasti. Yeah? That's a place where the Buddha was always in retreat during the rain season. Yeah? He spent about 24 retreats there, in that place. Yeah. So that's the second turning of the wheel, but this sutra classifies in the Perfection of Wisdom, which for the first time was taught in Rajgir, right? And then at the time of teaching the Prajnaparamita texts in Rajgir, then emptiness was being directly expressed, but the subtle mind realizing emptiness was hidden, you see? So the Buddha always teaches something and hides something, teach something, hide something. Because the most subtle aspect of the subtle mind was hidden at the time of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, because that was only meant for other beings who were more capable of understanding. And then the Buddha taught the 3rd turning of the wheel, right? In Vasali, one other place in India. And then he taught the 3 natures and the Lankavatara Sutra, for example. Yeah, so at that time, from the point of view of the mind-only school, he taught the view of the 3 natures. From the point of view of the Vajrayana, he taught the Vajrayana, right? The subtle mind. So Vajra can also be explained according to that interpretation, right? But that's we do another time. So yeah, so that's a little bit the title and the history of this particular text during the rains retreat, or one of his rains retreats in Svartavasti, yeah, and then Prince Jetta's grove. I mean, it says in the sutra. And Subhuti was the main person who requested the teaching, right? And then there were about 1,250 gelongs and bodhisattvas present. Yeah? So that's the first part of the text, the title, and where the sutra was spoken, and who was present, and who requested the title or this text. Okay? Then the Buddha talks about the two bodhicittas, conventional and ultimate bodhicitta, right? So in order to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, initially we generate great compassion. Yes, we just try to motivate ourselves for that purpose. And then by the power of the 7 cause and effect methods, right? Of equanimity, seeing all sentient beings as your mother, remembering their kindness, wish to repay their kindness, love and kindness, compassion, right? Then special intention of I will take responsibility to liberate sentient beings from their suffering. So without understanding suffering yourself, then it's very difficult to come to this stage, right? So that's why in the Lam Rim, first we have to see how incredibly fortunate we are. You know, sometimes we don't realize. It says in this text, no? Being born at the time of the 500, that means 2,500 years after the Buddha, according to Kamalashila. It means now, you know. It's very fortunate. We don't realize that. To have all these 18 freedoms and endowments of Precious Rebirth, you know, especially, you know, the last 5, it's kind of almost impossible to be born at the time the Buddha came, taught the Dharma, right? And that is still, you know, being preserved in different ways. You know, it's very rare. You know, it's only a few thousand years in world evolutions of billions and billions of years, right? So then 2,500 years in world evolutions of billions of years is peanuts, right? So to be born at that time is basically impossible, right? So this impossible became possible. So it's very fortunate, you know. Yeah, and then you have to understand that well, and then take the essence of the precious human rebirth, and then focus upon the different sufferings of samsara and try to get out of it and generate renunciation, right? Then only after having generated renunciation, compassion will come. And then this compassion among the 7 cause and effect methods, that compassion is kind of the seed for bodhicitta to arise. Because bodhicitta, as you know, has 2 aspirations, and one aspiration is to aspire the sentient being free from suffering, right? So that's compassion. Right? And the other aspiration to achieve Buddhahood for that purpose. So compassion is the seed for bodhicitta, conventional bodhicitta, to arise. And love and kindness and compassion is kind of the fertilization, yeah, and the moisture. Well, equanimity is the basis or the field. Yeah, that's what it says in many texts, that the field is equanimity, right? Our preliminary to the 7 cause and effect methods. And then love and kindness, and all the way up to love and kindness, is the moisture. You know, as you study Lama Tsongkhapa's great exposition of the stage of path enlightenment, in the beginning, when Lama Tsongkhapa talks about bodhicitta, conventional one, talks about very clearly how important it is to come close to sentient beings in order to generate compassion, you see? So that means that compassion is a seed, but to develop, it depends on this closeness of love and kindness, which is only be generated after those previous points of the 6 courses, right? So that proves that the need for compassion to generate is very important. So then this will generate in bodhicitta, right? So one of the aspirations of bodhicitta is compassion, right? And the other aspiration is wanted to become a Buddha, to eliminate the suffering of sentient beings. So then in the sutra, it talks about all sentient beings without exception. And then it goes in different classifications. Those who are born from eggs, from a womb, from warmth and moisture, or in a miraculous way. You know, there's 4 types of birth, or 4 types of ways beings come into existence. Yeah, either born from an egg, or from a womb, or from warmth and moisture, right? Certain insects, for example, or spontaneous, like spirits or bardo beings, right? So these 4 types of birth yeah, they include all 6 transmigrators, right? So that means focusing upon the suffering of all those beings. That's why in the sutra it mentions those different types of births. That's the way the Buddha generated compassion, and based on that compassion, generated Kasa Bodhichitta. Yeah, and then talks about the aspiration of bodhicitta and the ultimate, engaging bodhicitta. So the aspiration bodhicitta is how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings achieve the state of enlightenment, and I cause that to happen and made it happen, right? It's a kind of a plan we make, like going to Battersea Park. I don't know, that's what I use these days as an example, because that's what we mostly do here on a Sunday. That's my favorite park in London, Battersea Park. Yeah, anyway, those who know London, they know what I'm talking about. Those who don't, then think about your own favorite place on earth. Or yeah, some other places also. People in India, they think about Goa, some nice place in the mountains. So yeah, there's a kind of two different things, right? Wanting to go and actually going. Yeah. So aspiration of bodhicitta is wanting to go, right? But engaging bodhicitta goes a step further, makes plans, buying tickets. You know? So that means that you're actually going with engaging bodhicitta, right? So in a similar way, when we think about Buddhahood, which is our destination, yeah? So we think, oh, nice, yeah, maybe nice to go there, right? That's kind of aspiration. But then actually taking a commitment of taking the bodhisattva vow, for example, yeah, you progress and you go and you start going, and then you promise to practice the 6 perfections, right? Yeah, so that's engaging bodhicitta. Yeah, so the Buddha talks about that based upon the suffering of the sentient beings born from those different ways of birth, and yeah, it refers to all sentient beings without exception, to generate the body mind for that purpose. And that's the other aspiration, is want to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. And then you see, if I want to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, I have to train in the 6 perfections. Just a mere wish or the mere aspiration is not enough. I have to act, right? I have to create the causes for enlightenment, right? Because we know, anyway, we come to that in this text also, that how to establish the bodies of a Buddha, then also the Buddha said they are also in the nature of interdependence. Right? Yeah, so also the Buddha talks about the major and minor marks of the body of a Buddha are without discrimination, he says in this text. That means that the major and minor marks of a Buddha, they don't exist inherently, right? So that's what it says in this text on quite a few occasions. That means to establish the signs, or actually the Buddha, the bodies of a Buddha, you need to create causes. Yeah, and those courses can only be created from the sutra teachings by the power of this practicing the 6 perfections, right? Yeah, practicing the practice of giving, right? And the practice of morality, yeah? And then the practice of practicing patience. Yeah? So those first 3, they fall in the classification of accumulation of merit, according to this particular explanation by Kamalashila. So those first 3 perfections, accumulation of merit, which causes the form body of a Buddha to come into being, right? We have form bodies, we have a physical body, and we have a mind, right? As humans. So the Buddha also has something similar. He has a form body and he has a mind. So in order to become a Buddha, you have to create the causes for that. It's not just hoping for the best and you wake up one morning and it's all done. You know, it doesn't go like that. You have to create causes. Yeah? So to create the causes for the form bodies of a Buddha, there's different types. So we come to that another time maybe. So just think about the physical aspects, right? Then you have to accumulate merit, and well, those first 3 accumulations mainly, right? It says mainly, it's all mainly those first 3 of generosity, morality, and practicing patience. Yeah. So there are the causes from the form body of a Buddha. Then the Buddha also has a mind, and he has to have to create causes for that. And so the last 2 perfections, concentration and wisdom, they actually create these causes for the mind of the Buddha, right? Yeah. You see? So that's 5, and then effort is mainly, it says, right? Mainly. Yeah, it's a lot of debate back and forth, different commentaries give slightly different interpretation, but according to Kamala Shila, it's like this. And then effort has both aspects, because you can have effort in generosity, you can have effort in morality, and you can have efforts in practicing patience, right? In a similar way, you can have efforts with concentration and meditation, or wisdom. Yeah? So effort has two aspects. One with accumulation of merit, and one with accumulation of wisdom. Right? So the first three perfection, accumulation of merit, causes the form body of a the form body of a Buddha. And the last two perfections, accumulation of concentration and accumulation of the perfection of wisdom, causes the mind of the Buddha. Right? And effort has both aspects. Right? You see that? Yeah. So that's how we become a Buddha. That's why, and also that's why we have to practice the six perfections. When we say perfection of wisdom, then actually it talks about these six perfections. Yeah? Wisdom being one. So perfection is only completely perfected at the time of Buddhahood. Right? Yeah. Buddhahood is completely perfected. So for us, it's perfection in training. Jetsun Chogyal Gyatso in the Abhishamalankara, he says for us is kind of the perfection of the six perfections in training, because it's not Parul te Jimpa. Parul te Jimpa means, we translate as perfection, but actually to go beyond. That's the real translation. Parul te Jimpa, to go beyond. So Buddha has went completely beyond, to its full extent. The perfections are being perfected, right? Yeah, so that's why the Parul te Jimpa, the real Parul te Jimpa, the real gone beyond, is at the level of Buddhahood, right? According to Jetsun Chogyal Gyatso's interpretation. So for us, for Bodhisattvas, and for us, it's a practice of that. We practice the perfections. We don't have the perfections yet. Yeah, it's only being accomplished time Buddhahood. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the difference between aspiration of bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta. And then that's all to do mainly, initially the text talks about this conventional bodhicitta, right? Then the text goes into generating, the Buddha explains ultimate bodhicitta, because all these things, they came into being, because there was a question. These teachings of the sutras is kind of question-answer session mostly, right? And later on it got structured. That's what you do with a commentary. You try to structure it, because it's just a conversation, right? It's not that structured. It is structured, but not as structured as we commonly used to in the commentaries, because it's kind of a conversation. Yeah, because Subhiti asked the Buddha, Bhagavan, how should one who has correctly entered the Bodhisattva's vehicle abide? So if you have generated bodhicitta, as we just discussed now, so then how to practice, how to control the mind? Subhiti asked the Buddha, right? So that's the question, after having generated bodhicitta. Yeah, so then the Buddha starts to explain. Yeah, then he said, I will explain to you how one who has correctly entered the bodhisattva vehicle should abide, how should practice, and how to control the mind. You see? So after having generated bodhicitta, right? So we have different levels of bodhicitta. We have a more contrived form of bodhicitta, like I don't know about you, but that I have is kind of, you have to put so much effort to try to go in that direction of bodhicitta again and again, and then I walk out of my room, or even if I just stand up, it's gone. So that means when to put it to the mind, you have to put so much effort, meditating 7 cause and effect methods, combine it with exchanging self for others again and again and again, going to the Lamrim again and again. So it takes time, right? So if it's so spontaneous that that automatically it comes, right? So like for us, anger, for example, is so spontaneous that it's very easy to generate. Within a few split seconds, without effort, we can become angry. It's very easy, right? So that's kind of a very interesting kind of habituation. Yeah? So the more you habituate to bodhicitta, eventually it will come, as the Holiness says, right? As soon as when he was young, in his 16th, 17th year, when you start to have general interest in emptiness and bodhicitta, then over the years he thought emptiness is probably possible, bodhicitta very difficult, But now he talks about, his Holiness is complete light being, but from a humble perspective, for the benefit of beings, he talks, now I think I'm getting close, you see? So that's the power of habituation. It's mind-boggling. So His Holiness talks about these things for the level of sentient beings. Once there was a group of Westerners, more senior practitioners, and they asked His Holiness, "But Your Holiness, you always say you're just a simple Buddhist monk, So what hope is there for us if you haven't developed bodhicitta?" So then His Holiness, and this not many people know that, but His Holiness, for the benefit of those particular beings, His Holiness says something completely different. He said that he remembered the time he was with the Buddha. Very inspiring. So that means that from a humble perspective, His Holiness talks about these things, right? For us, to help us to train the mind. Yeah. So that's in the text. Then Subhiti asked how to train, right? How to train in the stages of the path. So then the Buddha starts to give answers. Yeah. And then the Buddha, of course, goes over this conventional bodhicitta as we just explained, right? And then the conventional bodhicitta of generating the mind of enlightenment, the 7 cause and effect methods, or exchange self for others, or combined with the 4 types of birth, as we just discussed, all sentient beings, basically. So then the Buddha talks about ultimate bodhicitta from the point of view of the perfection of giving, which is the first perfection, right? So if a bodhicitta enters the paths, then it trains in those 6 perfections, as we just discussed, right? So that's why the Buddha in the sutra also starts with that perfection, the perfection of giving. And then he says, if a bodhisattva acts with the perfection of giving, without discriminating correctly, meaning if that bodhisattva doesn't focus upon emptiness with the act of giving, then the act of giving doesn't produce the results it can bring if you focus upon emptiness. So the Buddha talks about the 3 cycles, or the 3 rounds, of the person who is giving something, the object, and or the action of giving, so to say, and the person we give towards too. All those 3 are in the nature of dependent origination, right? They don't exist from their own side. The giver doesn't exist from its own side. The act and the object doesn't exist from its own side. And the person we're giving towards too doesn't exist from their own side. So that means if you study grounds and paths, then you know that an Arya being doesn't create causes for samsara anymore according to the 12 links of interdependence, because having directly realized emptiness. So if you haven't realized emptiness directly, although there's virtue, it still can become a cause for samsara of the 12 links, right? Because the first link, ignorance, is still present. And there is not just present, but there's also the adherence at ignorance is present. If you have a direct perception of emptiness, then this adherence, is not present anymore. Everything appears as an illusion in post-meditation sessions, right? So if you have direct perception of emptiness and you come out of that session, then things appear very concrete, as we see with our eyes, but it's all like an illusion, right? Right? People who study a bit more, they know that. So that means that at that time, if you have direct perception of emptiness, you don't grasp what we say in Tibetan, shemba. Best translation is adherence, because there's also positive shemba. Sometimes we translate as grasping, right? So grasping at inherent existence, or adherence at inherent existence. So adherence is a better term, because in the Vajrayana practice, for those who study, then there's also a shemba, of shemba to ordinary appearance and shemba to pure appearance. So that the shemba to pure appearances is a positive thing, right? So then you cannot say grasping, but you say adherence. Anyway, there's those who study a bit more. So that means if you have really understood emptiness well, with direct perception, you don't grasp at things anymore, right? You see there's illusion. So if you grasp at the things, although it's virtue, it still creates a kind of cause of happiness within samsara, right? Because of the 12 links and related completion karma being present. So anyway, that's probably a reason why the Buddha in this particular sutra talks about so clearly in many ways that you shouldn't have the discriminating factor of things existing from its own side, right? So when it talks about non-discrimination or discrimination. It talks about these two extremes. Either have adherence at inherent existence, which shouldn't be done, right? And to be free of that adherence, right, to inherent existence. So that gives us a teaching that whatever we do in daily life, we should reflect upon emptiness, whatever understanding we have, or depend on origination. So then all the positive things we do become much more stable for causes for future development, right, in the paths. Yeah, so the Buddha talks about that. Then the Buddha goes back to the bodies of a Buddha, as we just discussed, right? That the Buddha also comes into being by practicing the 6 perfections and accomplish the state of Buddhahood, right? So that's the Buddha doesn't exist inherently, and the 6 perfections don't exist inherently, right? Because of the law of interdependence, that's why there's cause and effect, right? The seed doesn't exist from its own side because it depends on heat, moisture, fertilization to grow, right? Right? And also the sprout doesn't exist from its own side because it depends on the seed and it depends on different external conditions, right? Yeah, so in a similar way, our mind that has to be developed also depends on many causes and conditions and doesn't exist from its own side inherently without dependence, right? Yeah, so that's what the Buddha then starts to explain, that if you talk about, you know, these how to accomplish Buddhahood by the 6 perfections, and giving the example of the act of giving, then one should focus upon that everything is empty of inherent existence. And that also proves that you can become a Buddha, you see? Because you cut ignorance, you motivate for Buddhahood with bodhicitta, and you practice 6 perfections, so you accumulate the causes for the result to come about. If there's no cause, there's no result, right? If there's no seed of bodhicitta, then there will never be a sprout, right? Yeah. So even if there is a seed, but there's no fertilization, heat, and moisture, you know, of the 6 perfections to establish, you know, these bodies of a Buddha, then it will never grow, right? You see that? So that proves that everything is nothing is without causes and conditions. Yeah, so to become a Buddha depends on causes and conditions. You see that? So that's the Buddha talks about those points. Yeah. Then the Buddha says, you know, in order to achieve the state of Buddhahood, then also the Buddha, him or herself, is empty of inherent existence, right? Yeah. And then in this commentary by this Lama from Serame, you know, Dakwa Sheru, Juni Lama, he quotes from Nagarjuna. There's this famous quote His Holiness Dalai Lama often recommends, right? So there's a quote of the Fundamental Wisdom text by Nagarjuna. Yeah, there's a Fundamental Wisdom text by Nagarjuna, very precious, about emptiness. And then, well, in chapter 22nd, this 22nd chapter, there's a verse His Holiness often quotes. And then the verse says, neither the aggregates nor different. The aggregates don't depend on him, nor does he depend on the aggregates. Where is the Tathagata? So that's a verse written by Nagarjuna examining where is the Buddha, or does the Buddha, does the Buddha really exist, and how does the Buddha exist, right? So His Holiness quotes this verse very often. So those who take refuge and those who do some practices and the Buddha dissolves into you, you know, like we do with Lamrim meditations, or if you do some more advanced practices, then at that time His Holiness recommends to recite this verse, you know, because there it says, Nagarjuna says, neither the aggregates nor different from the aggregates, mean that the Buddha cannot be found among the aggregates and cannot be found separate from the aggregates, right? So we have these contemplations about the self of a person being one or different, right? So that comes from this verse. Yeah. So Chandrakirti's sevenfold reasoning on emptiness actually is based on these texts, and mainly based on the 18th chapter of Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom. But then in this 22nd chapter, it talks about the object of refuge. So that's why Nagarjuna relates it with the Buddha, that the Buddha is not one with aggregates, not different. Neither does the Buddha inherently possess the aggregates, nor do the aggregates inherently possess the Buddha. for the same thing, right? There's a very concrete I that appears when we get angry or attachment arises or somebody criticizes us. But that I is not one with our body and mind, right? You can look, but actually it appears very concrete without dependence. But you can check and you see that it doesn't exist the way it appears. But the way it appears is a problem. That's a very important thing to know. The way it appears, we believe that's reality, and then all afflictions arise. You see? So we have to examine if the way it appears exists, because the way it appears is a problem. Right? So then you see that the I appears in a particular very concrete from its own side existing I and mind that arises. But if you check, it's not one and not different from the aggregates, right? You cannot find it. If it's one, it should be many, because we have many aspects of the body, many aspects of the mind. So actually it appears, how it appears, it cannot exist. That's for sure, because there's many points in the body and in the mind, different moments, different parts of the body, different forms of consciousness. You know, so there cannot be one with that, because it appears to be one. And if it's one, then it should be many, but that's not the way it appears, you see. So then you check if it's inherently different. And also that's not really the case. Because you know, if you put your body aside, then does the I still arise in that way? You know, so it doesn't. Right? So that's the first line of that verse. Then there's no inherent dependence. It's not that there's a controller, which is the I, inherently independent, you know, from karma, laws, cause and effect, that is in control. It also doesn't exist, right? Because, you know, everything is in the nature of interdependence of cause and effect relationships. So nothing can be in control as well as not dependent on causes and conditions. That's not possible, right? Yeah, so that's another way to think about this verse. You know? There's no an I that inherently possess the aggregates, so to say, or the aggregates inherently possess this I, right? And then, yeah, then it says, where is the Buddha? Arjuna says, it's very interesting, yeah. But also, not only, yeah, this David Hume I mention often, very interesting. He, a Western philosopher from Scotland, comes to a similar conclusion. He says, you know, I cannot talk for everybody, but if I look inside, it looks like there's an I, but if I look for it, I cannot find it. Yeah? Then David Bohm, I don't know if you saw the movie Infinite Potential. I mentioned that a few times, but it's like half a minute towards the end. That's the most inspiring part of the movie, I think. Because he walks behind a tree and then says, I wrote him down somewhere. He says, very interesting. He says, shall I read it for you? I don't know where I put it. So yeah, there it is. It says, present ego identity is based on a wrong mode of thought. You see, he says, in which a person identifies with his thoughts, body, things. He creates an illusion, right? He says. The self which people feel they have is only a show. You know, it's a very convincing show, he says, and it feels, you know, it feels that it feels very comfortable. So that's why people act according to it. Very interesting. You see, very similar. That's a scientist, a physicist in quantum mechanics. You know? So it's very interesting how he even knows how to make the bridge between the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics. Very interesting. Yeah, so if you use correct form of logic, you come to the same conclusion as the Buddha, right? Yeah. So yeah. So that's what the Buddha talks about. Yeah. Time goes so fast. Yeah. Anyway, we'll finish, but. Yeah. So yeah, this is the main point, right? So as we go over the 9 examples, then that's a very important point. Yeah. So then the Buddha, after that, talks about karma and emptiness. Yeah. So in a similar way as you create causes for something to happen, right? You create causes for a Buddha to be achieved, right? So it's cause and effect relationships. So in a similar way, karma can be proven. Right? So if you understand emptiness well, and that enhances your understanding of karma, then you're on the right track. If you think, oh, everything is empty, nothing exists, then you don't have the correct understanding, right? Yeah, so if you really understand emptiness, then you should be fine. There's nothing else. there's just the law of cause and effect of body and mind. You know, it's quite scary in one way. But because of that aspect, you think, oh, I have to be careful, because I have to act according with this cause and effect in order to progress, right? And that's why the Buddha said, you know, if you don't want suffering, act according to the law of cause and effect. You know, that's why we say in the Lamrim, after contemplating suffering, then the first advice the Buddha is giving is, after taking refuge, is look at cause and effect relationships. That's the way you can develop, because that's reality. Yeah, the fire being hot and burning, we cannot change, but we can prevent our hand from putting it into the fire, right? Yeah, so that's So that's what the Buddha talked about then. And then also in the same sutra, then he talks about you have to realize emptiness. Without emptiness, you cannot eliminate this ignorance. And not just realizing emptiness of the self of a person. Also in this text, very interesting for us to know. You also have to realize emptiness of phenomena, Buddha says. Yeah, so we have the emptiness of the self, meaning the person who has a continuum, right? So everything else than the person, like the table, the computer, the screen, is also empty of inherent existence, right? So that we classify as emptiness of phenomena. A phenomena other than a person is being considered as a phenomena, right? So also the emptiness of that you have to realize in order to become a Buddha. And then he says all the 8 aspects of Sravakas, you know, they also have to do that, the Aryas. So the stream enterer, you know, and abiding in the result of stream enterer, you know, means, and the once returner. So if you're once returner, it's pretty good. Then you only come back once to samsara, and that's it. So there's a once returner. And then you have a never returner, a person who's in the last life before achieving liberation. And then the Arat. Yeah, so he mentions those 4 types, or those 4 classifications. You know, that stream enterer, once returner, never returner, and the Arats. They eventually all, you know, in order to come to those results, you have to realize emptiness. So that's it's not only uncommon for the Bodhisattva vehicle. So that's interesting for those who study tenets, because certain tenets schools, they only talk about in order to be liberated, to realize the self of a person is enough, right? But in the Prasangika, we say you also have to realize the self of phenomena, and this is a source for that. You know? So yeah, there's many other sources as well in the sutras, but it's one of the sources. So that means for those who study Prasangika, then then the sutra actually proves that. So that's one aspect. And then it talks about the uncommon affliction of the Prasangika. In Nalanda, when there's that, some time ago, we discussed, I don't know, maybe a few people were there. Yeah, so we discussed the 8 uncommon points of Prasangika. I called it uncommon points. Actually in Tibetan it says Kanegye, means 8 difficult points. But I thought if you titled it 8 difficult points, then people will freak out by reading the title. So I didn't call it difficult. It's not all that difficult. We studied it a little bit. So that's why we titled it Uncommon Points. Yeah, so now they want me to talk about 3 natures of the mind only. It's more complicated, but not that difficult at all. Not, yeah, it needs a little bit more thinking, but yeah. So we do that in October, something like that. Yeah, so those aspects are very important to understand, because then it talks about the uncommon view of the afflictions according to Prasangika. Because if you have to realize emptiness of self or person as well as phenomena, then what is actually an affliction that has to be abandoned? So that's very clearly set out in the Madhyamika Avatara and the commentaries on that. That's why, because that's the last thing before the break. All our afflictions are rooted in this ignorance of not only I, but also mine, right? We have a very concrete I that appears. How dare this person say this to me? I'm not like that. You know, that's how the I arises, right? When anger aversion arises. But then based on that I of a self of a person, then we say, how dare this person say this to me? How dare this person break down my computer? Something like that. Or a crash on my car. Or this person let me drop my phone. You see? So that my aspect, that possessive aspect, refers to objects that are not within the continuum of a person, which we call phenomena. So that proves that if there's a strong I that arises of the person, then automatically there's an I that arises in relation with possessions, right? You see that? So that means that we grasp to things externally as well. And that also has to be abandoned, that affliction, right? So that's why the root of all afflictions is not only the self of a person, but also the self of phenomena, right? So you have to realize the emptiness of both. That's the reason they give in Prasangika, right? Yeah, you can relate to that or not? Yeah. So that's, then you know the history a little bit. There's so much more to say and debates between when it's an uncommon affliction of Prasangika and when not, what appears and how this be apprehended. But yeah, if I talk about that, then people will probably fall asleep or walk away. Yeah, but yeah, at least the main picture you get, right? That the reason why Prasangika says you have to realize not only the self of a person, the selflessness of a person, but also selflessness of phenomena, right? So, yeah, then if there's a question, then we can do one or two before the break.
So, anybody has any question, just raise your virtual hand and I will open the microphone for you. If not questions, we take coffee.
Yeah, people need a break now. Yeah.
And then we'll come back. So what time, Geshe?
We meet again, what is it? 12, we need 20 minutes, okay? 5 to 11:55.
Well, there is one question, it is okay?
Okay, yeah, okay, one, yeah.
It's 1 minute. Okay, I'm trying to, okay. Now you're on.
Yeah. Oh, you have to speak a bit louder.
Yeah, we cannot hear you.
We cannot hear you. Alexander, we can't hear you. You can talk directly in the device or not? Yeah. Otherwise, you can try to fix it, and then, if it's possible to fix. You see, the device also doesn't exist inherently. Otherwise, it will always work and never break down. You see? Yeah. Or it will always be broken down. You know, either of those two ways. So then you can see straight away, you know, the emptiness of inherent existence of phenomena. Yeah, otherwise we do after the break. Or you can type it in the chat in the meantime, in the break, and then Sylvia can read it for everybody. Is it okay? Okay. Yeah, so we meet 11:55, 20 minutes break, exactly. Okay. So people can enjoy the coffee and tea, biscuits and everything. Okay, see you soon. Be fresh, okay? Yeah.